So let's first look at the natural perspective on abortion. We live in a country where the height and depth of our steps are regulated. We are a cautious people. We enforce speed limits and we fine jaywalkers. We take precautions and enforce caution. We have an administration that monitors our food. We do this to protect our tongues, our bellies, and our lives. Yet we also throw caution to the wind. We say we don't know when a human baby becomes a human baby, and so abortion has free reign. Somewhere along the way, we lost our caution. It seems wiser and more in line with what would seem is the American conviction to say if we don't know when life begins, we should be cautious. After all, we enforce the height of handrails and fine jaywalkers, so it seems unreasonable to not be cautious in regard to the most vulnerable. However, it seems in our country that have it your way is more important than caution when it comes to unborn humans. Our government regulates when we can cross the road for safety's sake, but is not safe or cautious with regard to the intersection of abortion. We must take due diligence in other matters or be held morally responsible, because if we don't, we are morally responsible. In America, we have reduced speed limits outside of school zones because we desire to do due diligence and protect our children and youth. We enforce those lower speed limits not because we know someone will get killed if we drive above that speed limit, but because life is precious and thus we take precautions to protect it. We do not even have to talk about the destruction of innocent human life. The endangering or failure to take due diligence, be cautious with human lives is a moral atrocity. We are anything but cautious in contradiction to so much of the American way when we literally go into, i.e., proactively act upon the protective life-sustaining womb and destroy the unborn baby. We shouldn't have the right and don't have the right to speed in school zones. We shouldn't, but do have the right to destroy unborn babies. We sadly have the right to abandon caution and crush human skulls within the protective womb of a mother because we are not sure that what is inside is human. When we are unsure in any other case, we would err on the side of caution. We have an unreasonable double standard when it comes to the protection of life. We should be consistent and not destroy the unborn, even if we are not sure what is inside the womb constitutes a human baby. We have briefly considered what I have labeled a natural argument against abortion. We seek to protect life in all sorts of circumstances, even though we don't know when a certain situation will be lethal or not. So that same logic should apply to abortion, even if abortion could possibly destroy human life. So abortion, it seems, from a natural perspective, should be unacceptable. Now let's turn to the biblical perspective on abortion. First, Genesis 1:26 through 27 tells us we are all of us, created in the image of God. And second, Exodus 20:13 tells us, thou shalt not murder. However, are these texts enough? Or could we object that is all well and good, but what is inside a woman is not human? What can we say about that question from Scripture? Exodus 21:22 through 25 says, when men strive together and hit a pregnant woman so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hits her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. There are quite a few things to note on this significant passage. Notice what the result is if there is harm to the child. See verse 22. Just a fine. However, what happens if there is harm? Life for life, it says. Notice that this still means it is an accident, but the punishment is still life for life. In other cases of accidental manslaughter, this was not the case, but provision for house arrest and protection was made. Therefore, this shows the seriousness of protecting unborn life. If God has such hatred for accidental death of an unborn child, what is his reaction to intentional death? Psalm 51:5 says, "Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me." Remember the context? David is repenting of sin. What is David saying here? He is saying he has a sinful nature inherited from Adam. He is not saying it was his mother's fault. Note, sin in Scripture is a personal quality, never an impersonal one. It is never a property of things, only of persons. That's from John Frame. Thus we see here a very strong argument for personhood, beginning at conception. If David had a sin nature in his mother's womb, then it follows that he was a real human being with a soul. Fetal tissue, or any type of tissue, or an inanimate object for that matter, are not sinful. People alone are sinful. Do you see the conclusion here? David was a person, a real human person in his mother's womb. We could look at Luke 1:35 also. Jesus was a divine human person from conception. We could also look at Psalm 139:13 through 16. So we see in Scripture that we should take precautions so as to avoid the possible destruction of life. Deuteronomy 22:8 says, "When you build a new house, you shall make a parapet for your roof, that you may not bring the guilt of blood upon your house, if anyone should fall from it." Thus, even if you're not entirely persuaded by these arguments, the principle that we see in Scripture would lead us to prohibit abortion. As Frame says, even if the above arguments are only, say, 80% certain, they make it highly probable that abortion destroys human lives, and God's law clearly tells us not to take that risk. So our practical response should be exactly the same as if we were persuaded 100%. To illustrate this point, imagine I go hunting with you. We go out into the thick of the woods, and after a while I hear a sound in the grass, so I do what any hunter should do. I don't hesitate. I point in that general direction, and I fire a few shots, hoping I might hit the intended target. Would you go hunting with me very long if that was my practice? No, because you would either be too scared or dead. Do you see the principle? You don't just shoot at any rustling noise because a human could be making a noise and not a deer. We take precautions to protect life. The United States military goes by an ROE, rules of engagement. They, for instance, have to have positive identity before they engage an enemy force, or they have to use escalation of force. Our military personnel take great precautions to not destroy innocent life, even to the point of putting their own life in great harm or in great danger. Yet in our own country, we do not take these same precautions with our unborn. We do not have positive identity, and yet many are okay with taking life. Should we not rather take great precautions, even if we are not exactly sure when life begins? If we as a country make people put handrails on their own house and enforce all sorts of other codes, should we not also protect the unborn, even if there is disagreement when life begins? It is also important to consider DNA. John Frame points out that from the point of conception, unborn children have a full complement of chromosomes. Therefore, the child is not part of his mother's body. His genetic makeup is different from hers. So we should not treat the unborn child as if it were, treat an unborn child as we treat hair or fingernails, or even like we treat organs like the gallbladder or liver. The unborn child is a separate and unique human being. Some say the problem is that the child is dependent on the mother, and that the mother then has the right to choose. Yet the child is dependent on his mother before and after the birth, inside and outside of the womb, and the mother has no right to kill the child after he comes out of the womb when it's still dependent. So some ask the question, what about pregnancies resulting from rape or incest? These situations, though few, around 1% or less, of all abortions, should be treated with much sensitivity and love. However, the child should not be punished for the sin of the father, as Deuteronomy 24:6 says. Some say if abortion is not allowed, it is a wrongful restriction of freedom. However, does that make sense? The government makes restrictions. Isn't that what we've empowered them to do? I do not have the freedom to drink and drive. I'm not allowed to shoot guns at people. The government is restrictive. The government restricts people, and that is right and good. We should not be able to drink and drive, shoot guns at people, etc. So in conclusion, I believe it has been briefly demonstrated that abortion is wrong and cannot be morally justified in any circumstance.